For a century, the Panama Canal has been the unsung hero of global trade, the unsinkable bridge connecting the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. But hold on to your cargo crates because there's a new kid on the block, or should I say, the block of land. Mexico is about to unveil its latest brainchild, the inter-oceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. Catchy, right? But what's the deal with this ambitious project, and could it potentially outshine the Panama Canal? Well, stick around, folks, because we're diving deep into the canal wars today. Before we dive into Mexico's mischief, let's take a moment to salute the OG, the Panama Canal. Think of it as the Suez Canal's partner in crime, cutting through the Isthmus of Panama like a hot knife through butter. And speaking of isthmus, when was the last time you dropped that word in conversation, huh? Essentially, it's like a connector bridge between two landmasses. In this case, it links North and South America, with the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Pacific on the other. This strip of land is about 65 kilometers wide, and voila, there's your Panama Canal about the same length. Sure, it's not the longest canal out there. The Suez Canal and the Grand Canal in China have their bragging rights. But hey, it's not about the size, it's how you use it, right? Now, picture this. A map of the Americas before 1914. Shipping goods from Europe to California was like navigating through a maze blindfolded. Ships had to take the scenic route via Chile, dodging stormy seas and currents in the treacherous Strait of Magellan. And if they were feeling adventurous, there was always the ice-cold Northwest Passage up north, but good luck with that. Then, in 1902, the US was like, enough is enough, let's build a shortcut. And thus, the Panama Canal was born, promising to slash thousands of kilometers off the journey and save sailors from a headache-inducing trip around the continent. But let's not sugarcoat it. Building this bad boy was no walk in the park. It took dynamite, drills, and some serious sweat to clear over 200 million cubic meters of earth. That's enough dirt to build a mountain taller than the Empire State Building and wider than a football stadium. And those poor workers, they had to endure scorching temperatures, rock slides, and the occasional tropical disease. Sounds like a vacation brochure from hell, doesn't it? And just when you thought it couldn't get any trickier, there was the little matter of a 30-meter elevation difference between the canal's endpoints. Cue the engineering marvels, locks and gates to the rescue. These nifty contraptions helped ships climb to the peak before gently lowering them back down, like a water-themed roller coaster. Fast forward to August 1914, and the Panama Canal officially opened its floodgates to the world. The SS Ancon proudly led the charge, becoming the first ship to sail through this modern marvel. And boy, did the floodgates open. Over 1,000 ships cruised through in the first year alone, and the numbers have been climbing ever since. Nowadays, it's like rush hour on the water, with over 10,000 ships passing through annually, hauling a mind-boggling 500 million tons of cargo. And they don't do it for free, folks. Oh no, there's a toll to pay, and for the big boys, it could cost upwards of $500,000. But hey, it beats the scenic route via Magellan's treacherous strait any day. But as of 2024, this famous waterway could have some serious competition. That's right. It's finally time to talk about the Tren Interocianico, or as it's formally known, the Interoceanic Corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, or CIIT for short. If you're thinking those letters don't quite add up, that's because it's an abbreviation of the Spanish name for this project. To understand the origins of the CIIT, we need to jump back to the end of the 19th century. That's around the same time that the United States first started thinking about the Panama Canal, and as it turns out, they weren't the only country exploring these kinds of ideas. In 1884, a powerful man became president of Mexico, José de la Cruz Porfirio Díaz Mori. That's a mouthful too. Let's call him Porfirio Díaz for short. Porfirio Díaz was from the state of Oaxaca, on the southern coast of Mexico. When he came to power, he decided to build a railway line to connect Oaxaca to the coast of Veracruz in the north. In other words, he wanted to build a railway between the Atlantic and the Pacific in the hope of tackling the exact same problems that the Panama Canal later solved. Most people have never heard of it, but in the middle of January 1907, this new railway, known as the Tren Interocianico, officially opened its doors. This was 7 whole years before the Panama Canal, and global traders started to use the railway right away. Over the next few years, hundreds of thousands of tons of cargo were successfully moved along it. Mexico started to thrive economically as it found itself playing a vital role in international trade. But this success was short-lived. When the Panama Canal first opened its gates, most shipping companies decided to stop using the Tren Interocianico and switch to the canal instead. In 1914, when the Panama Canal opened, the amount of cargo traveling along the Mexican railway dropped by a third, and a year later, it had dropped by almost 80%. This was despite the fact that the train line through Mexico was actually faster than the Panama Canal. It was closer to America and saved a good few days for anyone who wanted to use it. So why did people choose Panama? At first, it might not make sense, but there are actually a couple of very important reasons. First of all, a lot of the shipping companies were America-based, and they preferred to support an American project as opposed to a Mexican rival. On top of that, a civil war had recently broken out in Mexico. The violence scared a lot of the other companies off. Logistically speaking, it's also simpler to use a shipping lane. You don't have to unload your cargo onto trains. And so, with such a massive drop in traffic, the Tren Interocianico became too expensive to maintain. It collapsed into disrepair, and it stayed that way for 100 years, until an ambitious new president came to power in Mexico, López Obrador. In 2018, President López Obrador made plans to redevelop Mexico's former railway line, aiming to create a new corridor between the Atlantic and the Pacific, a modern rival to the nearby Panama Canal. The ambitious project was officially announced just a few months later, with plans for a trio of primary rail lines: Line Z, Line FA, and Line K. If anyone knows what these letters stand for, please let us know in the comments. We've had our team working hard on this and none of us can figure it out. Anyway, back to the CIIT. Work began in June 2020, cutting back vegetation, pulling up old tracks, and replacing them with shiny new ones. In total, the new railway with those 3 main lines is expected to be more than 1,000 kilometers long. The Mexican government is also planning to build a series of industrial parks along the railway. And López Obrador isn't messing around here. In 2023, he sent the army to capture a stretch of old railway that was officially owned by a private company. Later, he offered to compensate the company, but not before making 100% sure that this stretch of railway was safely in the government's hands. He didn't want to risk the project collapsing just because he couldn't strike a deal with a stubborn private company. There have actually been a few clashes with protesters, including several groups from indigenous communities in Oaxaca. They're worried about the environmental impact of the project. Construction workers have been cutting down trees and damaging local habitats. One group of protesters was briefly imprisoned after supposedly attacking construction workers with machetes. In other places, local families have been forcibly relocated. It all feels a little bit controversial. But most people in the region think the negatives of the project will be outweighed by all the benefits. Some experts think that the CIIT will create 500,000 jobs for local people and attract $50 billion of international investment. This economic boom could transform the country, and that's what President López Obrador is counting on. In August 2023, Line Z was officially completed. In September, López Obrador himself rode a passenger train from one end of the route to the other. The journey took less than 9 hours, making it officially faster than traversing the Panama Canal. 2 months later, just a few days before Christmas 2023, the first trains opened their doors to the general public and started to carry local passengers from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific. The other 2 lines are expected to be finished by the end of 2024. Despite all this progress, the government still has some work to do before the CIIT can be used for international shipping. Another feature of the project is a total overhaul of the ports at both ends of the train lines to make them more suitable for cargo ships. This includes a giant breakwater at the port of Salina Cruz, which will consist of hundreds of thousands of tons of rock to shelter the harbor. These giant rock walls are meant to reduce the risk of cargo ships being knocked over by storms or waves, which really wouldn't be ideal. Work is still underway on that breakwater. But as of recent news, it's getting closer and closer to being finished, meaning that the CIIT will open to cargo sooner rather than later. So, what happens to the Panama Canal? Well, it seems like it might have some serious competition. So some experts are throwing around the idea that the CIIT could be the new kid on the block, outshining the Panama Canal in terms of speed and cost efficiency. Imagine that. Companies might ditch the Panama route for a Mexican railway adventure. Talk about a plot twist. But hold your horses, folks. The CIIT wasn't built to kick Panama Canal to the curb. Nope, it's more of a supportive buddy, complementing the existing canal rather than trying to steal its thunder. Now let's talk Panama Canal. It's like the MVP of shipping, handling millions of cargo containers every year. But lately, it's been feeling the pressure. Picture this. Panama hit by the driest season ever recorded. What do? Limit the canal like it's a dessert buffet, letting only 25 ships through per day? Cue the chaos. Companies are throwing millions just to secure a spot, while others are left high and dry waiting for their turn. Enter the CIIT, our hero in shining tracks. It could swoop in and ease the load on the Panama Canal, giving companies a plan B when the canal's in hot demand. Imagine smoother sailing, folks. No more missed deliveries because of water shortages. The CIIT could be the Panama Canal's trusty sidekick, boosting global trade and connecting the world one railway at a time. But wait, there's more. The CIIT might have competition of its own down the line. Remember that Chinese businessman who tried to build a canal in Nicaragua? Yeah, that didn't go as planned. But who knows? Maybe someone else will pick up the torch. And let's not forget about the Northwest Passage, slowly thawing out thanks to global warming. So buckle up, folks. Trade between the big oceans is about to get a major makeover. What's your take on Mexico's latest mega project? Drop us a line in the comments. Until next time, happy shipping.